All right, we are live. All right, everybody, all you freedom-loving boys and girls, live from planet Earth. It's CLS After Dark. We're just like the drug. You don't know how long it's going to last. Yeah. That's our new little mantra there.
I love it.
Hey, we've got a new face in the live stream tonight. When we're going to do a little bit of introduction and housekeeping, and then we'll come over and we'll introduce our guests as we always do. I just want to let everybody know, as always, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time out of your lives to watch these live streams. Tonight's live stream is going to be a little different because it's almost going to be, it's a subject, it's a topic, but it is really going to be kind of focused on the outdoors and gear, but a lot of it's going to be focused on mindset. And there's a lot of direct application to just what you see going on around the world around you today. Matter of fact, on that note, if it fits or if it comes up, we might just talk a little situational awareness. Because if you're a Tesla owner, apparently you're like, Adolf Hitler's, clone or something like that because you own a car. So we'll talk a little bit about situational awareness maybe, but the real focus is going to be on, we just came up with the title and we called it the light fighter concept. And so before I get into the guests, well, actually, you only get into the guests and then boys, before we get into it, then I'll tell my little light fighter story. But that's what it's going to be. It's going to be taking this mindset that was pretty dominant in the military. Think back, during the Vietnam era, a new style of warfare for the American military, jungle warfare. We're fighting an enemy that traveled very light, very fast, very quick. So, that kind of morphed itself through the 70s and the 80s, and that's kind of when, the 80s is when I was in the military. And that's where you had a lot of this light infantry, light fighter, ranger kind of concept going on. So that's going to be tonight's subject. But before I do, just real quickly, Monday's Loadout Live is going to be just me, and it's going to be kind of a Q&A. I'm going to talk about the differences between our EDC belt pouch, our EDC utility pouch, because I've had a bunch of people asking some questions about utility pouches, talk about some little modifications or tweaks, and then pose a question to you guys kind of on a utility pouch / we'll just save that for Monday. And then next Thursday's live stream, if you can make it, I really would love to see you here. It's going to be something that's very dear to my heart, and that's both figuratively and literally. And it's going to be about the VA. And it's not just a bitch session. We're going to be talking about some of the problems within the VA. One guest for sure is a retired VA. I'm still working on one or two other people. I'd love to get somebody from the current administration or a politician, so we could put some feet to the fire. And I'll probably share a few stories why the VA has like a special place in my heart for all the wrong reasons. So that's our housekeeping. And then we got a couple comments here. Looks like we've got some people. Gene is here with a big woo. Henner Ben from Minnesota, and Learn Me Something tuning in from the asphalt jungle. All right, there we go. If you guys got questions or comments, you know the deal. Put them in the chat. I'll probably ask Redbeard to help keep an eye on that with me tonight, because it is sometimes a little bit, you're trying to drive the conversation and keep things going, and then you're trying to look over here. I can't walk and chew gum very well, I guess what I'm saying, boys and girls. All right, let's introduce our guests. Let's just go around, clockwise. Let's start off with Nick. Nick, welcome to the live. Thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody, share what you're willing to share about yourself, who you are and why you're here, how much I bribed you to come on the show, and why you wanted to be here tonight.
So, long-time listener, first-time caller, I guess. My name is Nick. I'm from Florida. I work in IT. It was actually helpful. We were talking a little bit before we started, Redbeard and I, what's my background in gear? I taught people how to rock climb. I ran a rock gym here in Florida. So kind of from a civilian aspect, getting into, when you're climbing up a wall, the light fighter concept, while you're not thinking about it in that regard, is pretty important, because everything, ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain, right? Mm-hmm. And what you don't want to do is bring too much stuff up a wall with you, because then you're chucking stuff off, and all that. So that was kind of how I professionally got into gear. And then, we're going back a while. I was a much younger man then. And, just ever since then, I love gear. If you ever meet another climber, you'll talk gear. Hey, what kind of carabiners do you use? What kind of rope? What are your shoes? What's your harness? All that stuff that we talk about. It's built in, right? Because we all have this expectation. So I love talking about gear. And I have taken a lot of the stuff that, I've got some stuff here in front of me, but some things like this that I use in my everyday life now. I don't teach people how to rock climb anymore. I am an IT guy. So, your typical low level, what's that Saturday Night Live, your company's computer guy, that thing. That's me. I go around to people's desks and make sure that your monitors are connected and that you have batteries in your mouse and that you're, changing your passwords, stuff like that. So using some really professional grade gear that helps me do my job to the best of my ability. And I think it's an interesting concept. Like Mark and I were having a conversation about it, and that's kind of how we got to this point, is just, hey, it doesn't all have to be military stuff. I mean, it's very professional and it's totally capable of doing that. But how can you utilize something like an Edo or something like a ham roll in your just regular life? So
nice. And how does it keep you in the fight and help you sustain your everyday grind, right? Because that's kind of like the key feature of like that whole light fighter mentality is, not, what, and again, we just kind of talked about that show and a lot of, I almost said alive. Maybe that's what they should call the show,
right.
How alive are you at the end of how many days you've been out there? But, you always hear so many people talk about that and, and just like, and it's a starvation game and things like this. And, again, conversation with Nick, conversations with Redbeard. I'm sure you guys have had those conversations amongst yourselves, at home. It's like, do you want to survive or do you want to thrive? Right. So, there's a little bit of a mindset that goes along with the light fighter concept, but it's also, hey, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but it's like, I'm not just doing this. I mean, yeah, you want to survive. There ain't no doubt about that. There's no thriving if you're dead. So obviously you got to meet those, those first core principles, staying alive, but, and then having that mindset and the tools and then, and knowing how to use those tools so you can go ahead and thrive. So, yeah. All right, Redbeard, you've been on here. Are we? And look, I don't see Czar Baroda. I see Sentinels of Liberty podcast. So again, go ahead, let everybody. I'm sure most everybody who watches this podcast knows who you are by now, but still tell everybody a little bit about yourself and plug your new podcast.
Yeah. So I am, as I always like to say, I'm Mark's resident constitutionalist and liberty advocate. If you have an issue, I'll bring it up. It's got a place in my heart. It's kind of the core of what my podcast is. I just started the podcast, had my first episode last week. And honestly, I thought it went pretty good. And from what everybody said, they liked it as well. Aside from that, I'm a gear guy. I am an outdoorsman. I really like firearms. I went to school for firearms, gunsmithing in particular. And I'm pretty much just kind of the resident everything cool, I guess, is what I'd like to say. That being said, I'm going to do a shameless plug. I have a episode coming up on Saturday, which originally was meant to be regarding the First Amendment, but I have a big announcement. I was able to. I had a phone call today with a writer at the Libertarian Institute. Tom Edlam, he's a economic writer for them. He does a few other pieces as well. And that's what he also got his degree in, is economics. He was previously just last week on the Scott Horton show, made an appearance there, who is also a pretty big person in the libertarian circle. Scott Horton, I believe, also set up the Libertarian Institute as well. So he's pretty big amongst libertarians. He's going to be coming on. We're going to be talking about economics. I know Mark was really, really wanting to hear about that. So Mark, this is kind of a tip of the hat to you. And I hope you enjoy that. I'm really looking forward to it. He sounds like a really amazing guy. And to be honest, I have a really good feeling that I'm going to end up learning a lot from this guy. And I'm I guarantee you all will too. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm honestly very honored to have somebody like him come on for my second episode. So I hope you guys enjoyed. It's at 1700 or 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time, otherwise known as commie time. And that's going to, what's that?
Well, I just like fake time because commies aren't fake. They exist. So, but this time we're living in right now doesn't exist. This isn't 1800. This is 1700 right now. But yeah.
So it's going to be on Saturday, 1700 Central Daylight Time. I really hope to see you all there. As always, if you like what you see, comment. Maybe throw me a subscribe, a like. Heck, even if you don't like it, then let me know. Dislike it, comment down below, and let me know what you don't like. So that being said, I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Right on. And it was a really good podcast. You had a great guest on last week. Really well done, that interplay between the two of you. Great subject. And you're right. And then digging into that a little bit more from that economic freedom and, and look, and I don't know if I had one person give me crap because I've been doing this Epstein files thing. And, I love it, by the way. Well, but it's these small things that matter, right? This is the most important. Look, there's a cabinet and there's different leaders of different parts of the government, whether you like it or not, and they're the subordinate leaders. They're out there doing stuff, but there's certain things that, I just don't think we're going to move forward. I just don't know how we truly move forward and get back more into, what your podcast was talking about, Jeremy, and on that and the true meaning of the Constitution, following the Constitution. And not having, again, call it whatever you want, right? It doesn't matter if you didn't vote for Trump or don't like, Pam Bondi or whatever. At the end of the day, the government is accountable to us. Yeah. And no one, we just spent so many, months hearing that no one's above the law. Well, there apparently are people who are above the law, and there's organizations within our government that work outside of the law and don't follow the Constitution. So give Jeremy's podcast a great listen. And I guess that was my weird little plug because I'm going to do a special video tomorrow and maybe just explain a little bit like why. Because I've had some people say, Redbeard, I'll turn this back over to you and then Nick, just before we get into the meat of our conversation. People like, kind of like, oh, quit whining, like they're busy. And like, there's a lot of things, that we need to discuss, but this isn't one of them. And I don't know how, no offense, everybody can have their own opinions. But, I'm having a hard time rationalizing that in my mind, just from like, hang on a second. How is that not like the most important thing? Like if this doesn't get resolved, if we don't have people held accountable or brought to justice, well, then what is the point of our system? But we're, then it is rules for thee, but not for me kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think to your point, I think it's kind of a part of the core of my podcast, honestly, is really like saying like, the onus is on each of us, like we are responsible for keeping liberty and, yes, we elect these people. And yes, we delegate as individuals, certain levels of authority to these people to perform certain jobs. But in the end of the day, like we are a form of checks and balance. And honestly, Mark, it's like there's this mentality, and it's been this way for a long time, where it's like a fire and forget weapon. It's like, oh, it's fine. I'm sure it's gonna hit the target, right? Like, right, you guys, like, and as you're walking away, it like takes out a tree instead of the intended target. It's like, oh, that actually didn't work out very well at all. And it's like, no, like there's still a certain level of requirement that we're supposed to be there to kind of guide this, the system over the target. And but we are also the safety switch too, right? Like we also are the determining factor of what it is that it goes after, how it conducts its business, how it's supposed to work. And as I've always said, and Mark's probably heard this a million times from me, but the Constitution does not enforce itself. And anybody that thinks that that's how that works needs to go back and actually study the Constitution and honestly study what the founders talked about. They knew this full well. And so to have this expectation and then all of a sudden to be disappointed in how things turn out, like, oh, like I guess the Constitution isn't that powerful. It's like, well, like where were you at your last town meeting, or where were you the last time a serious level of legislation was proposed? And to be fair, like Nick, your neck of the woods, Florida, has done a pretty good job as far as being active. And you have one of my favorite people living down there, Chris Ann Hall, who is one of the greatest constitutional attorneys, I think, in our country. She is amazing. If you're not familiar with her, she's in your neck of the woods. Amazing person. So, I mean, we have to be involved. And that's one of her big things too, is like, you've got to educate, activate, and get involved. Because without us, I mean, yeah, it really is just a piece of paper. It really is just a set of ideals. It really is just a grand, experiment. And I think we are more than that in the United States. I really do. And we're always meant to be more than that. So,
boys and girls, you just got a little sneak peek. If you didn't check out Redbeard's Saturday podcast, that's a little bit about it right there. And I'm sorry, I had to go over to my phone because there was a comment like kind of implying like, hey, how many days, Mark? And I, just getting behind the power curve, working my ass off, blah, 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 just like everyone else. But and I was going to pull up X just to show it and answer the question. And I'm over here on X, and it didn't post it. So I might be pissing some people off over there. Maybe I shouldn't be tagging, Elon's bestie, in the post and calling him out. So, I'm not sure what's going on. But anyway, long story short, and let's bring it over to Nick just to get his thoughts on that. Yeah. Because we've never talked about this, and I'm not trying to throw Nick under the bus. He might not think, Nick, you might not think it's really all that important, but, what are your thoughts? Is it important, just before we get into our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, voting is just the beginning, right? I really like Learn Me Something's comment about applying pressure. These people do work for us, and if you're not happy with what's going on, like, it's not enough to just change your vote in 4 years or in 2 years. You have to be calling people. You have to let them know that you are upset. It's part of our job as citizens, right? It's a republic. Yes, we give some of our power away, but it is our power that we give away. And if you're not calling them and applying that pressure, you're just going to let them do whatever they want. And it doesn't matter what party it is. People that are in positions of power want to remain there, right? So you gotta stay active. You gotta stay on them. It's like, I have a 3.5-year-old, right? If I let her do whatever she wanted, this house would be a disaster.
I love that so much.
But, and just that, and here, I guess, just because Gene was asking, how many days, and let me just do this real quickly. So here is how many days, Gene. I just brought up what I just posted. This is what it didn't post while we were talking. I had to repost it. So, Gene, that one was kind of for you there, my good man. That one was for you right there, brother. So, Gene's a big Futurama fan. Gene's a great guy.
I love it.
Always great comments. Let's see if Gene's on fuego. But, but in a strange way, and then let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of tonight. Just exercising that brain housing, right? Exercising that muscle that you have up there, that is your most dangerous asset. That is your most vital asset, if properly nurtured, if properly taken care of. And then from like that, if you're not looking at, your community, if you're not looking at, helping to shape that world around you, or how to properly operate within it, or making sure that those, again, as Nick just said, we're a constitutional republic, delegated authority. We have representatives that we elect to go and represent us, right? And then so more often than not, they get into those positions of powers and they don't represent us. Well, from a light fighter perspective, is that a tool that you want in your tool bag? Like we used to make jokes about, like where, and I still say today, like thinking about stress or issues, who put that rock in your rucksack? Because we used to always think it was funny to throw a rock in somebody's rucksack. And we'll get into this. I mean, you were down to exactly how many, quarts of water I had in my squad. You knew weight really matters, as Nick kind of was pointing out. Whether you're rock climbing, whether you're hiking, whether you're doing ultralight, whatever it is, like you're going to be paying attention to these things, and you want the tools and the resources and your allies, however you want to look at it, because your gear is an ally, right? It shouldn't be a detriment. You want them to be force multipliers. And, if you're not sitting there and exercising, your civic duties and responsibilities and rights, well, then, somebody's going to keep throwing rocks in your rucksack, and it's just going to get really unbearable after a period of time. So, okay. So I hope that kind of made sense there a little bit, guys, kind of just wrapping that whole, but the memes are going to continue. And I'm probably going to do a special video. Matter of fact, I might do that video, Redbeard. We'll talk about it offline. I wouldn't mind having you on there. Just a really short 3 to 5 minute video. But I do think, you bring a little bit of that constitutional flavor. So maybe either that or you'll give me some notes, right? And, and I can have
of course. Yeah. All
right. But here we go into the light fighter. So kind of the premise, just to kind of get everybody starting, I just kind of told a little stupid story. So, I was in an Arctic light infantry unit, right? So we were light infantry trained for cold weather. It was a Army Reserve unit. It was the best unit I've ever served in the military, hands down. And maybe it was the time, the era as well, but it was real world. It was really difficult. It was hard ass training, and it was real world, realistic training. And, you were prepared. And, and I guess, during that time period, you weren't wearing body armor. There were flak jackets and stuff like that, but it was all about, one of the jokes, if you're ever in the military, I'm sure you've heard it or say it yourself, travel light, freeze at night. You literally spooned with people. You might have one whoopee or a poncho liner, as we used to call them. A poncho liner just to wrap you and your buddy up. And then, with a poncho, which actually that's now trapped too much heat and you ended up sweating, and that's a bad thing too. And you were paying attention to all of these things because the survival of you, your team, your squad, your platoon, whatever echelon, size element you're operating in, and the mission boiled down to your ability to not only be a war fighter, but understand terrain, understand topography, understand weather, and how to use these things to your advantage. In other words, think about Rogers Rangers and the Swamp Fox and stuff like that. You wanted to be a devious, tricky, sneaky little bastard, right? That's what it was kind of based on, right? And so again, I'm sure everybody's seen a war movie where the sergeant, the patrols get, matter of fact, I think that's one of the most classic ones I can think of is Platoon. The new guys are getting ready to go on their first patrol, and it's a combat patrol. And, that character, I think, was the platoon sergeant or the squad leader. I can't remember which one, but they're going down the line and he's just grabbing the stuff and shit canning it. You don't need this. You don't need that, because that was unnecessary for what they were doing. It was going to weigh you down. It was going to potentially be a negative impediment on the unit and potentially get the unit, killed or captured, that type of stuff. So, for me, and I'll turn it over to Nick or Redbeard, who wants to go first. That whole light fighter concept was really, it's a war fighter mindset. There's no doubt about it, but it isn't, again, this isn't a military thing. Because if you really look again at Alone and any of these Survivor shows or like Survivor Man, I'm not saying these people believe or think this way, but you'll see a lot of the same concepts and the same ideas demonstrated in what they do and how they approach being in nature or how they approach their survival situation, things like that. Everything is thought out. Everything's got a purpose, and hopefully it's got multiple purposes, and it's got to be, and we might bring Carver Matrix back up, but, you've got to be able to, get it, purchase it, repair it, all these other things. Yep. So all of your gear has to make sense on some level, right? It isn't just very few of these people in those situations or in the military. Did you have just that one bright, shiny thing that only did one thing? Because that one thing it did had to have been the most important thing in the world. Otherwise, you didn't carry with you. I mean, you were using, things that had multiple purposes, could use in multiple manners. Like, I think on a different post not too long ago, and if you think about mechanized warfare, this is where that kind of really came in. What I'm getting at is like your M17 Pro Mask, that whole carrier was nice and compact. That was a pillow. That was, if you didn't have your pro, there was you found different ways to utilize every piece of kit on your body. And that's what we're going to kind of get at, is kind of a gear breakdown, and maybe it'll be a little bit more on the tactical side. Look, I know there's guys out there, and this is where I'll shut up, who like doing CQB and like having the plate carriers and all that. Okay. Yeah, I get it. But that's very singular, right? The chances that it's really going to be zombie apocalypse or Red Dawn. Well, actually, I should just shut up right there. It's kind of because even right now, it's looking like it could be zombie apocalypse. So, Nick or Redbeard, I kind of just rambled for a bit. Who wants to chime in and take where I just went and go? Nick?
Yeah,
right.
I'll ramble for a minute. So I mean, to your point about plate carriers, right? I mean, do you have it with you when it actually kicks off, right? Like, I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but like, are you an effective person without that piece of gear? And getting into the whole light fighter kind of mentality is, yeah, think of a whoopee, right? A whoopee is a blanket. It's infinitely useful, right? But it's a poncho liner and it's designed for that. But they've found other uses for that one specific piece of equipment that allow you to use it in multiple ways. And what does a whoopee mean? Well, you would be sorry without it, right? I mean, like, that's the whole thing,
good.
right? So
that's awesome.
That's always on you usually, right? Just to think about like the way that we use stuff listen, I'm a gear junkie, right? I buy a new piece of gear and then you have to reevaluate every single piece of other gear that's downstream from that. Because maybe that fulfills a role. Maybe it is this new shiny magic thing that does exactly what you want it to, and it does this and this and this. But I mean, is that a real thing, right? Like when I buy a new flashlight, does it replace all the components of everything else that I need, or can I cut down a piece of gear, or is this next thing, right? The thing that ends that process for me? And no, it never is, right? I've been buying gear for 40 years now, and it's always, oh wow, I got this cool new thing. But you have to make you either have to edit it a little bit, or really, really live with it. And then you find what's wrong with it that you don't like. And then you make the changes to the piece of gear that allow it to do what you want it to do, or do the additional thing that you wish it did. I mean, one thing that I've always heard is, you always wanted to be friends with the parachute riggers, right? Because those were the guys that could sew for you. And they could put extra loops in gear where you wanted it, and all of these other things where, okay, so I have this issued piece of gear, and again, it's going to be different for the military versus civilians because we get to buy whatever we want, right? And in the military, you're issued exactly what they say you're going to get. But for better or worse, like on the civilian side, you're always able to just be like, oh yeah, I need that. I don't know. I feel like I've gotten far away from the question.
That was a good ramble. I'm gonna just kind of take it and just kind of go backwards real quickly. There's a couple comments. You are issued gear. If you're in a good unit, or if you're in a tier 1 or a tier, upper tier type of units, think like special forces. Those kind of uniformity and those type of restrictions that you see down in more of like the mainline units isn't there. Unless you get a real just jackass first sergeant or sergeant major, and and everybody has to have their first aid pouch, in the same spot. Now that makes sense from a light fighter perspective because it could be in the middle of the night, and back in the 80s, night vision goggles, weren't the greatest back then. PVS-5s, PVS-4s, like that kind of stuff. They were big, bulky, cumbersome, not in a lot of wide use initially, as well as it was part of a technology coming out. So coming across your buddy in the middle of the night and knowing exactly where his first aid pouch was going to be, that was important, right? So that's kind of a light fighter thing. So even though it was a uniformity thing, but we had all that kind of stuff. So think if you were like, doing like, if you're doing a lot of alpine, type of hiking or climbing type of stuff, you want them to make sure where everybody's got this piece of gear or this oxygen bottle, or hey, we're in avalanche country. You can't go out there without an avalanche, signal kit or something. And everybody in my group has got to have that in this pocket or on their person, that kind of stuff. So that same mentality applies through, right? Hey, all of your sensitive information was always stored in your upper left pocket, right? Whether that was your SOI, your signals, your like code book or your ID card, any important document, whatever, that was always here. And then this was always there. And everybody had two 1-quart canteens. Everybody was carrying 2 quarts of water on them, at all times. And then you, the squad leader, if you were into light infantry, I mean, this is what we did. I know somebody's gonna say that's bullshit. No, we did this. Like, you stopped your squad or your team, because we did a lot of really small unit operations. Very rarely did we actually do platoon. And when we did, it was usually platoon defense. I mean, because it's light infantry, it's all about raids and ambushes and reconnaissance and things like that. But when you stopped and did a security halt, 1 canteen came out and it went through, I guess that's the other thing too. If somebody had a disease, we all got it then, but it went all the way through. So you now know in your mind, again, depending on the size of your element, I've got 17 canteens left, or I've got, and you can just quick do the math and figure out if you're going to need to hey, we're going to have to do an unregistered stop at this next stream because everybody's got water purification tablets, because that's what you needed. Now it's probably purification straws and, all kinds of different ways of doing it. But back then it was just tablets. And then, hey, but we got to hit that stream, even if it means going a little bit off patrol, because we're consuming too much water because of the weather, whatever it is, and we need to top off. So you had to have field craft skills in addition to that uniformity, like you're saying there, Nick, and kind of just working down backwards and what you're saying, and that gear's got to, the civilian side. So I guess that's where I was kind of go. A lot of the stuff that you see on the civilian side, I mean, what do you guys think? And we're Redbeard, I don't know if I want to go on a different direction or if you want to respond first, but wherever you go, just, I would ask you to start maybe, make that comparison over to the civilian side too, because half of the stuff from the civilian side actually was, R&D'd or originated somewhere in DARPA or some other group working with the military. And I'm not saying DARPA specifically, but you see what I'm getting at.
Right.
Yeah. Things like Permaloft or whatever, the Climaloft, all that stuff. I mean, that came from the military.
Yep.
So,
hey, and then you just got a big shout out from a former Marine, Nick. He says, I finally know what WOOBY stands for. Or whatever. It's not just a child's blanket, John.
It's not.
No. All right, Redbeard.
So there's a couple things I want to hit on, which is the first one is I'm a big simplicity person, and I've talked to Mark about this. Like, there's a lot to be gained from simplicity. You don't have to overcomplicate something. If you see something and you're like, oh man, like I bet that works really good, but then it's like it has a lot of moving parts. Well, you have to sit back and you have to be like, okay, like, what is this going to cost me down the road? Like, yes, it might be really, really good, and maybe you do take it, but there's also something when you're looking at a piece of kit, it's like, the more complicated it tends to be, the higher chance there is for a breakdown, the higher chance there is for a failure, the higher chance there is for something to potentially go wrong. Not to say that you shouldn't take something like that, but understand that it becomes a little bit more perishable than something that's a little more simple. So when you look at something simple, like cordage, right? I love cordage. I probably have too much cordage, to be honest. And some people might say, well, you can never have too much cordage. And I know a lot of people like that. And
hang on. So just right there. And totally, as always, unscripted podcast. So if you think about that, so cordage, cordage is only useful if you know how to use it, which implies in there that you have to know how to tie knots. You have to know how to tie effective knots that work in multiple situations, do multiple things. But so to your point though, Jeremy, there's people who just suck at knots. So what is the solution now? You see a lot of people doing, taking really thin steel, big spools of it, because then they can still tighten, but then they're just doing that little twist and tie.
And to be fair, if you're not into that, there's this really, really wonderful thing that you can find at Fleet Farm or any other like outdoor store. It's something called gear straps, and they're this pre-manufactured thing that literally takes the knot out of the equation, and they work really good, you guys. Like, simplicity, right? And to be fair though, that being said, like, yes, like take some time and actually invest in learning at least a handful of knots. Like even if you're not great at them, still learn them, right? Because as time goes on, you might surprise yourself and be like, oh wow, like I needed this for something and I knew it and it worked. You know, I've done that to myself a number of times, and I do it at work on a regular basis to where I don't like I'm not great with names, but if I have to strap down a load and I have to secure the strap because there's a tail, my coworkers will sit there and be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Dude, like, how do you not do this? Like, why would you not do this?" And it becomes unconscious. So simplicity is really, really good. It's your friend. I'm not saying throw away something that's complicated, but just understand that like there's caveats to that. And I saw both Mark and Nick shaking their heads, so I tend to think that there's an agreement there.
Redbeard, we're going to make a climber out of you yet. You got too much cordage and you're learning knots. But I would argue also to the point that if you're not good at knots, right?
Yeah.
What's the old adage? If you're not good at knots, tie a lot. But I would argue that if you're not good at knots, practice. Carry a little piece of string around.
100%.
Just do them, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not that complicated. I'm not that smart of a person, and I know so many knots just from timing that are absolutely useful all the time.
Yep.
And then you don't need an extra piece of gear because you've got the cordage,
exactly.
Right? You don't need a gear strap, or you don't need a carabiner. You've got the stuff that you need because you're carrying a Hanka 550 cord around with you, right?
And just to the light fighter perspective. And so again, if we did Carver, and as we go on, maybe I'll bring Carver up in a bit. But like, so we could take, you know, and we're not picking on Redbeard here, Redbeard in the cargo straps, but this is part of, you know, that light fighter mentality that, you know, you can take to the woods. Okay, you got a lot of cargo straps, and they have some multiple function, right? They got a little bit of versatility in a couple different
areas. Perfect, but they work.
But you can do everything with cordage. You can do everything a cargo strap can do, plus a whole hell of a lot more that a cargo strap cannot do.
Exactly.
So if you're looking at, you know, weighing, you know, figuring out how much weight, you know, so just we call it Cuban weight, right? How much space does it take up and how much does it weigh? Well, cordage for me is going to be a winner if I plug it into Carver.
Yes.
For a lot of reasons, but that doesn't mean a cargo strap. Again, you know, you're not going to use well, you could, wouldn't be the recommendation. You could use cordage if you had to do a tourniquet, but I would, if I had to do it, I'd rather do like an 1.5 inch or a 2 inch cargo strap, or even a 1 inch, as opposed to, those were my only choices, as opposed to doing it with a bunch of cordage, you know, 550 cord. So great point, Nick. I mean, but you got more, Nick, on that? I know Jeremy's.
I mean, I carry cargo straps in my car, right? I mean, they're super useful, and absolutely. But you talk about like ratchet straps or something. I mean, those are heavy. I'm not going to take those in my backpack out into the woods. Right. I might take some tubular webbing, right? Again, it's got all the functionality of the cargo strap, and then you learn a couple of knots. You can learn yourself a trucker's hitch or whatever you need to do to ratchet that sucker down, and really get yourself, you know, the same level of functionality. And again, I'm not trying to pick on ratchet straps or cargo straps or anything. I mean, I use them. So they're convenient. They're convenient as hell. But then again, right, that's part of that weight balance, right? Is the convenience of having this thing pre-ready made and ready to go. Does that help me, right? Or is that something that that's the first thing that comes out of my backpack when I'm 16 miles down trail, and I'm like, man, I don't need this, and I throw it on the ground. And then, do I need it? Maybe I do.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that 17th mile I run into a branch or something, and I need that webbing to tie up my arm. I don't know, right? So,
you know, so I don't know about you guys. I always have like a bundle of 550 cord, usually I don't know, like 10 or more feet of 550. It's super small, super compact. There's no reason to not have it. And the nice thing is there's independent strands in there that you can use for a variety of things. But I have on the trail, I've had shoelaces break, and I'm like, I got a lighter and I got a knife. I'm going to make some shoelaces. Exactly. I'm going to make some shoelaces. I've thrown up a quick ridge line just to do like a tarp setup for camping. I mean, there is no reason today for nobody to not have 550. It's so common. It's so easily acceptable or accessible.
It's the bottom of my
yeah,
bag, right? And this is just one hank of many that I have distributed throughout. This came out of my radio bag because it was sitting right next to me. And this is a line for pulling up antenna.
Yeah.
But it's good for anything else, right?
Right. And it's, and so like, not to kind of harp on this, but again, it's the simplicity of things. Like 550 is like so simple, it's so usable. And that's what I love about it. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up, and Mark, we've talked about this, but
hey, just before you bring that up, just a small little stupid story.
Yeah.
Light fighter, you're going to just be muddy and stinky. And, maybe you're going to be away from your ORP or from the rear for, like whatever your patrol is. And you're going to be out there for, 3 to 5 days. You don't even think twice. Like, you're not bringing an extra uniform on that. You're going to wear your one uniform. Right. And, if you were in the military, where there, a lot of guys go, no underwear, they just go, bare bones underneath their BDUs, and other guys, I was a big compression kind of short guy. But, there are environments and stuff where, you want to have some of that breathing, going on.
Right.
Well, of course, that was the one time. And then I blew out the whole inside of my left leg on my trousers. Right. So you can't be walking around with your Johnson flopping around, so back to cordage. Everybody always had hanks of 550, right? Because, just important. And everybody had, well, not everybody had sewing kits, but most of us had a sewing kit. Because again, very small, doesn't weigh anything, doesn't take up any space. And you just never know what you're doing. And you got to fix stuff all the time yourself, right? There's no one coming out there to do it. So I just took some 550 cord and poked holes with my Gerber, my Leatherman tool or whatever, my knife, whatever I had. And then I just sewed it back up with 550 cord. And I had a 550 cord sewn up inner leg. So no one had to, take a look at. Well, it was also a tactical risk because I'm so white, it was like a ground floor walking around. So, I had to...
Especially that inner thigh, Mark. I'm just sure.
Yeah. But just so again, 550 cord, when you think about it and you apply like that light fighter, mindset. Well, and again, you see it on all these shows. Well, yeah, of course, people are bringing that stuff. And again, some of them are going into wires, but a lot of 550 cord, especially nowadays, the survival stuff with all the different innards that can be put in there to include fire starting material, fishing line, all of the stuff. So,
And with that being said, a conversation I've had with you, Mark, and I don't know if you've had it with Nick, but one thing that we've always come back to, especially if you're in the light fighter mindset, is understand like the environment you're going to be going into, because the environment has a tendency to dictate the situation. So you're not going to bring the same thing into the desert that you just brought into the Arctic. You're not going to bring the same thing for the woods necessarily that you're going to bring into scrubland, because each of these environments are unique. Now you might have some similar weather patterns, which you can take into account, but there's certain situations and certain scenarios in your environment that are different, and it's going to dictate the things that you bring. Or it could even make something totally negligible that you don't even have to bring, which makes you even lighter potentially, or it could make you a little bit heavier. So you have to really kind of examine, where am I going? What will I be doing when I get there? What will I be doing on my way there? And what is it going to take for me to do what I need to do? If you can examine these different things, and Mark and Nick, you guys can obviously add to this. If you can examine these things, you're going to be at least more prepared on your way there and once you get there to deal with whatever it is you need to deal with, and then hopefully be able to return more or less in one piece, as opposed to, half of you is missing because you got eaten by a bear because you made some stupid mistake. I don't know, but it's
I mean, to your point there, right? Yeah. I mean, understanding your environment is just another check in that knowledge base, right? I mean, if it goes back to learning how to tie a knot, right?
Yeah.
Or learn your environment, or learn how to sew, right? Stuff like that people don't associate so much with the tactical community, right? I mean, knots are not the best example. But something like sewing is a perfect example where we don't focus on that, or radio work, or communication of any kind, right? Where you don't think about that. Everybody wants to go out and go shooty bang bang, right? And go play on the range for a couple hours and wear their plate carriers and everything else. But really, like, teach yourself how to sew, man, right? Like know how to fix the gear, right? Because what happens when you're fancy, plate carrier, one of the shoulders pops off, or a buckle, or I know, Mark, you hate zippers. One of those zippers comes off, and you gotta do some field repairs.
Yep.
So,
just on a stupid little note to what you just brought up, another, just maybe it'll be a little bit of story time. So this is me in the agency. I'm a ground branch guy. I'm working with a military unit, and this is like a scout type of unit, right? And so up armored Humvees, that kind of stuff. We're in the part of the country where there's still lots of enemy, like you just said, Nick, a little bit of pew still going on in a lot of places. But with the technology that we have, everybody was so reliant on GPS, and then the FBCB2, which is like the computerized moving map tools showing, which is all great, fine and dandy. Hey, we're all here, we're all there, we're all that. And relatively limited, but not limited, but it's a great tool, but it doesn't replace a map. It doesn't, because and it doesn't replace your ability to do terrain association, or to navigate, without the GPS, to look at the stars and figure out which way is north, and which, therefore every direction, or to know your terrain, and all that kind of stuff. And so, just to my stupid story, to what you were kind of getting at, Nick, everybody was so dependent upon the computer screen and not seeing the actual terrain. And then we got into a little bit of a jam that had to do because they didn't properly, just what we're all getting at, they didn't properly plan how much fuel, what's the range of the vehicle, what's the capacity of the tank, what's the range of the vehicle on that tank over, hardball is not the same thing as going cross country. It's the same when you're walking. Same with your pace count. So a lot of that stuff kind of came into play. And, and I'm not saying I took control of that unit, but I'm like, okay, hang on a second. What do you mean you guys, that other vehicle doesn't have nods? Well, it's the vehicle system. Like, so you don't have the ability to dismount people and go and operate away from that vehicle. No maps, no nods. Like, I'm like, okay, you know what? Follow me. And I just did the old military thing and just follow me, type of stuff. But so I like what you just said, right? So even when you have that stuff, you have to know how to do it. You have to know your environment, but you also then have to realize that bright, shiny thing. And I think you guys have both already said that. What happens when that shit breaks, right? So that's part of carvo. Can you recover? Can you fix it easily? Can it be replaced easily? Can you drive on and continue your mission? And in this case, that was a combat patrol, but what if it was just, I'm trying to go have a fun time with my family? Like you just said, Redbeard, and a shoe breaks, or I've overpacked, or I didn't even take into consideration the environment I'm operating in, the weather patterns, what it is right now. What if it's like 90 degrees? Well, heck, most of you guys know I hate hot weather. I think Minnesota summers are almost too hot. But like, imagine, I've been in Florida, like, holy crap, Nick, humidity, the heat, all that kind of stuff. You got to take all that stuff into consideration and plan accordingly, and have both the mental and the physical capability. But then you have to have multi-purpose piece of gears that can allow you to do multiple things to overcome any one of those type of situations.
Right.
I yield the floor.
Yeah. It really is. So there's 2 points I want to make, and I don't remember who it is that brought up weight. It might've been Nick, but I think both of you might've hit on weight. But it's like, I'll use an analogy here. What happens if you say you get into your truck and you drive 50 miles, right? And then the next day, after you filled up your truck again, you get in that same truck and then you put a trailer on it with something in that trailer. Are you going to have the same fuel usage? No. Like, you're going to use more fuel because it's more work that's required out of that truck. It's no different than us. Like, anytime you start adding weight to something, it's going to require more effort, more fuel, more calories, more protein, more fats, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why this whole concept is so, it's so emphasized on weight, right? It's light fighter. There's a reason for that. you're getting the most out of what it is that you bring with you. And so when you look at something like this, one, simplicity is key. Don't overcomplicate things. If you don't know how to do something, learn how to do something, because that builds in redundancies. Having something that has multiple uses, so that way you're not having to bring 3 extra types of gear to compensate for one that should have been able to do that job. A tarp. I'm a huge tarp guy. You can do so many different things with tarps. I've been a ground sleeper for a long time. I know a lot of people that have hammocks. Hammocks are great. I personally like tarps. There's so many different pieces of gear that you can do so many different things with. And I feel like this, for whatever reason, the modern person, and I don't mean to say this in a bad thing, but I think what it's kind of turned into is, oh, I need to have this piece of gear. Oh, I need to have this piece of gear. And I think Nick kind of hit on this, like, oh, that really looks nice, or I really want this. It's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Like, you can do that, but do you actually need it versus do you want it? And in that being said, and then I'll kind of yield the floor because I'm going to prepare something for one of my next points. But there is something also really good about modern day contemporary gear. People have found a way to make it lighter. People have found a way to make it more durable and more useful to the average person. People have found a way to make things with multiple uses that extends your ability to do whatever it is you're going to do. So I'm not crapping on modern gear, but what I'm saying is be mindful in the things that you buy and the things that you invest in, not forgetting skill sets, because that is going to make you a far more effective light fighter. A lot of it is up here. A lot of what you do is up here mentally, how you can apply your skills, how you can use your gear. If you don't know how to use your gear's going to use you. It's kind of the way I think about it, right? So what we get out of our gear is definitely what we put into it. And, it's really nice to have things, but if you're not making the most of it, and I know we've kind of harped on this, if you're not making the most of it, then it's kind of just weight at that point. It just becomes weight, and
just another rock in your rucksack.
100%. And so, like, there's things that I could do better. There's things that I could learn, and I'm sure these gentlemen have certain areas that we all feel like we could do better in. But it's the idea of, not being afraid to fail, going out there, trying it, and figuring out where you went wrong and then improving on it. Like Nick brought up, knots. Like, if you're not good at knots, the only way you're going to get better at it is by, pun intended, getting naughty and learning how to tie these things, right? And some of the most basic.
It applies to everything. If you're not good at shooting, get to the range. If you're not good at sewing, start 100%. Fixing up your clothes. I mean, like, repetition,
you get better by doing,
right? And I want to take it back to, like, your kind of civilian, because that's, again, kind of my area, right?
Yeah.
Ultralight gear is super cool. It's super cool, man. It's great, right? And they make really, really good stuff now out of, like, X-Pack and all these exotic materials, right? But at the same time, one, they're expensive. Right, that ultralight gear. I don't know if you guys have looked at it, but holy moly, it's expensive, and it's not as durable. Right, it's not going to be as durable as, like, some 500 denier or whatever. Right. So it's ripstop, but when it punctures real good. And so and I mean, again, it's expensive, right? It's what's that triangle? You can have good, cheap, and durable, or what is it? I forget. There's this trifecta of a product, right? Where you can have something that's good, something that's quick, and something that's cheap, and you can get 2 out of 3, but you can't have all 3, right? Or something like that. I'm probably botching that,
sure,
but that's kind of the adage, right? And yeah, I mean, there's some really cool whiz bang stuff. I mean, I like to hammock camp, and I also am a big car camper, right? Like, we just got a whole rooftop tent and an awning and a whole bunch of other stuff to spend.
Nice,
a ton of money on it, right? And it is cool, but we already know the answer. I can't take that in a backpack out into the middle of the woods, right? Because that
Right.
sucker weighs 200 pounds and that will kill me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even want to.
Well, but
I don't even. It lives on top of my truck now. I'm never taking that off. So, you know, like I'm a huge gear nerd, right? Very, very guilty of buying the newest whiz bang stuff, and I love it. I mean, I was laughing at your reliance on gear, because we didn't talk about this, but I went to the Merchant Marine Academy and I had to take celestial navigation, right? And everybody in the class, all of us youngsters, are like, well, why do we need to learn celestial navigation? There's GPS, right? And GPS back then was huge, right? I wear a GPS on my wrist right now, but the whole idea was, well, what do you do when you're out in the middle of the ocean and the ship's rocking back and forth and the GPS is out, right? Or you can't get that radio signal for I forget what the thing before GPS that mariners use. It has a name. But yeah, what do you do when you can't see that? Well, you get out on this side of the ship and you look up at a star and you figure it out. I mean, how many people know what the Big Dipper is? How many people know what Orion is, right? It all comes back to that. What's up here? This is the most valuable piece of gear you got, is the stuff that's in your brain. And being able to do, like you were saying, Mark, like being able to do a little bit of land nav, right? Like, I mean, if you're so reliant on your little cool guy flip down ATAC, end user device that you can't make, you don't know what your pace count is, right? That's a failure of you as a person, and there's no gear in the world that's going to help you with that.
And I just gotta throw that in there. So, boys and girls, ATAC. He's not talking about ATAC's the camo. That ATAC is well, I'm familiar with it on like the phone program, but it's like kind of in the ham radio world. It's kind of the moving map tool. It is really cool. There's no doubt about it. And that goes back.
It's super cool.
Yep, in the military, FBCB2 and all these different moving map tools, computer systems, showing you all the terrain where your elements are. I mean, it's really good until it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then,
sorry, I did go a little bit alphabet soup there, didn't I? I went ATAC, end user EUD. I was like, oh man, let's get into it. But yeah, so yeah, it's little cell phones that flip down off of your plate carrier that tell you where you are and where all your buddies are. And Mark, they are so cool. Like, you can control drones from them now. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that. No,
with the joystick ones that they have. Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And look, and so again, light fighter, if you could have a small portable drone that could help you, like, like imagine this. I mean, this happened to me as a kid, a high school summer camping trip. We were, canoeing in, Boundy Waters canoe area. And, one of the portages, had been a lot of snow that year, or whatever, or something happened and the portage was washed out. And me and another individual got tasked to go find a good route to because you're carrying all this gear and canoes and you're going down a trail, but now you don't have the trail. Well, it's not fun just humping that through, like, imagine like, a scene from a jungle movie, right? Like, it sucks. Northern Minnesota can be like that. Yep. Pine trees right on top of each other.
Oh yeah.
The boreal forest, but that would have been a great point, back to the light fighter. If, that technology is there and you can have it. And again, but then you got to think about batteries, battery consumption, battery recharging, recovery, the line, is it line of sight, who can fly it? Is it easy to learn? But that would have been a great example right there. Like, hey, well, rather than wasting time and energy and possibly risking injury, because that actually, like, and this isn't a stupid Minnesota story. I almost panicked. The mosquitoes were so bad. I almost panicked. And that's what happens to a lot of people. I mean, they're just all over me. I'm like, just don't open your mouth, close your eyes, get your bug net out. So I had my bug net on my person. So again, light fighter kind of concept, got it down over my head, blew out, squished all kinds of mosquitoes all over my face that were in the net, and then, rolled my sleeves down, put some bug, but like, so there would be a great example of how technology can really be, instrumental, and it can be beneficial. It's a force multiplier. But if you don't have that, or if it breaks, or, a bald eagle comes down and attacks it and takes it away from you or something like that, like, because there's been videos and stuff where that happens. A bird attacks it or something,
Yeah.
Then you have to have the skills and you have to have the other resources and the tools. So for me, from a light fighter perspective, and I wanted to kind of just throw this back over to Nick as well. You have a vehicle. Well, that vehicle is a tool, right? And so use it, so that's exactly what I want to do. If I'm going to, like, I'm getting old and I'm broken, and, there's my days of carrying, 80-pound rucks, which is stupid to do from a light fighter perspective anyway. But, those days are gone, man.
But we all do it, right? I mean, you got it. Oh, I need that.
Yeah. But that's where I want to go. But, and so you're just using, but just like Jeremy said, and what we kind of already said, but then you've got to think about fuel consumption, limitations, range. What type of terrain are you driving over? Is it
resupply, right? Like, am I able to get gas where I'm going? Is it still available, right? I mean, is it a diesel vehicle? Can I siphon up McDonald's fry oil or something? I mean, like all of that. Yeah. Right. I mean, I love the idea of, I have a drone, right? And that's really, really cool. And it's totally a force multiplier, right?
Yeah.
It is. And it's amazing what you can do with those things. And mine's not super fancy. It doesn't have, FLIR or anything on it, but they make them now. And that's incredibly cool, right? And that's technology. And I mean, that's becoming the new standard. And if you don't have that, you're all going to die. That kind of mentality, right? But a thermal blanket will kind of hide you from that, right? For a time until it heats up and then you can see it. So, having that knowledge, again, I know we keep coming back to this, but knowledge trumps gear is the way, right? Because when you're doing that light fighter thing, you have to take everything out of your pack, look at it and go, do I need this? You have to make those hard decisions. And if it's something that you can replace with something that can't be taken away from you, i.e. something that's in the gray matter between your ears, that's a much more valuable thing.
That's a great point. I am going to bring up the Carver slide just real quickly because just of where we're talking, just to show people, go back. Jeremy and I did this when we did the Mission Critical podcast. I know I've done it I did it sometime last year. I think maybe we did it for Millstone, or I did it as a standalone where I was kind of just going over this stuff as though it was a class and I just reviewed it. But I will share this with everybody. We're only just going to do it just briefly, just because it does pertain to what we're kind of talking about here.
That's right? Perfect timing.
Yep. Well, you did that.
Because I actually need to go get and I need to go get a refresher. So while you're doing that,
there you go.
Okay.
All right. All right. Well, here we go. Let me see, bring this full screen. All right. So just real quickly, Carver, I know this is going to sound stupid. It's a military term. I know there's so many people like, oh, I don't like the military stuff. Yeah, but most of the things in the civilian world have some origin somewhere along the lines with some military innovation or idea. And this is just one of them. So think of Carver and you can read it. You're just kind of looking at your situation and your gear. And this is what I like about it, because we're sitting here talking about gear. Should I take this? Should I take that? Well, this is a way to think about it. How critical is it to whatever, hey, if I'm going to go and I want this girl to really like me and think I'm a badass, well, having this, bottle of wine with me on this little 5-mile hike is going to be very critical, right? Because I want her to or whatever. So criticality, how important is it to whatever you're trying to do? Like Jeremy said, you're out in the desert and I'm trying to walk 30 miles, for whatever. Well, then water, obviously, or a water container is going to be a very critical piece of gear. Or you could look at it like for that tarp, because that's a windscreen, that's a sunscreen. So you would start breaking it into, and then accessibility. That means how easy can you get it, right? Again, this matrix really was designed for something else, but I think it really applies to gear. How accessible is it? If that biggest, brightest, shiny thing that we keep talking about, and now everybody wants drones with FLIR, but if there's only 10 at a time and they sell out all the time, or it's beyond your price point, well, then that's not very accessible, right? So it's going to score negatively. Recoverability, we've already talked about this. Can you fix it, and can you fix it easily? right? Type of thing, because if it's going to be if it's a tool and it's so fragile that it's awesome, but if you use it once under the wrong circumstances, it breaks, and then it's just another rock in your rucksack. So that's going to score low. And then that goes into vulnerability. Is it really fragile? Like we just kind of said, is it prone to breaking? The effects on the populace, I always just think about that as like, what is the effects on me? Is this going to keep me warm? Is this going to keep me, from getting hypothermia? Is this going to keep me, with the proper amount of caloric intake or sugars when I need them? Like I look at it in that sense. And then recognizability, which just kind of goes into functionality. Is this something that I can, let me just come back to the main. Well, I guess we're there. I'll just leave it there for a second still. Is this something that everyone can easily recognize it and know how to use it? Let me just hide this for a second. Yeah. Oh, I don't know what I just did there. There we go. Sorry, guys. I hit the wrong button. But, that recognizability, stupid story. I love, and Benelli, I'm not dogging you guys. Don't sue me or anything here. But the Benelli M4 is an awesome shotgun. But it isn't very easily recognizable in the sense of like if somebody's grown up and has only used a pump action shotgun or a breech, like a single or a double side by side, whatever it is, over, under, whatever, those type of, platforms. It actually has a cycle to it. There's a couple different moving parts. There's different ways to get it into battery and stuff. So it's not easily recognizable. Whereas you could give almost every American a 12 gauge pump and they may not know exactly, but they know, like, I hit this little button and then I pump it and then a round goes in and boom, 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 and it's pump action. That's way more recognizable than like a more complicated platform. So again, if it's a really complicated knot, just to go back to knots. Well, okay, is that the knot that you want to put in your hip pocket, or do you want to spend your limited time and resources trying to learn? Whereas you could just do it like, we just kind of, whoever said it, like a jam knot or whatever other type of knot that can get the job done. Well, then that's easy. Everybody can learn it very quickly. You could teach your whole party how to do that in 5 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. Whereas, you're trying to teach people how to do like Prusik knots or, end of the line Bolins. I'm just making up names of knots, or I'm not making them up. I'm just saying knots, but those might be a little bit
knots. I'm impressed.
Yeah, but those might be knots that are a little bit more complicated for the average person. So that's where that recognizability comes into play. I just want to do one more thing here, and then we'll go over to you guys. I got to go to the slide deck. Give me a second here. And so I just wanted to point this out. The reason I think this applies to gear, and when we're talking about the light fighter, kind of concept, which is just really just like, light fighter is, whether you want to call it ultralight or like, to me, that's no different from saying bushcraft, in my world. I mean, because there's so much overlap, or a survivalist or, adventurer or frontiersman. That's really kind of the same concepts, the same attitude. But one thing I wanted to point out here is, and everybody's talked about it, I've been a big fan of, like, it's not just 5W, it's 5W and 2H. So the, who, what, when, where, why, but then you got to look at how and how many, and you apply that. And once you start doing that, you'll see how many times you'll say, how many this, or how much does that weigh, or it just really gets you thinking about examining your gear and asking yourself, do I really need that? And Jeremy already kind of did this as a great example earlier in the podcast. He was talking about, thinking about your environment and who you are and who's with you. He was already doing this. So that's another little skill to practice that I personally think will help you have a better time out in the field, more pleasurable, more enjoyable. Hey, look, if you can do it, if you're just truck camping, and if you got a big enough truck or whatever, and you're just going to an easy place, load up the kitchen sink, enjoy yourself. But don't forget, if you didn't plan on how much extra gas you're, if you're too far off the beaten path, or you did all that and you didn't take any medical supplies, and little Jimmy is allergic to bugs or bees or whatever, you got to think that stuff through. Right. And then my last little point, I don't know if this still shows, there's Carver. You can see, you could score all this. So over here on the left, I don't know if my cursor, because I can't see you guys right now, but instead of these targets, think about a piece of gear, right? So like, think about a tomahawk, and this, we've done this before, a camp axe versus a tomahawk versus a machete versus, a big knife, right? You could look at every one of those things there and break it into Carver, give them weights, give them scores, and come up with like, hey, you know, for the environment I'm operating in, this machete is going to work a lot better because I'm in a jungle, right? Imagine like clearing a path through a jungle with a tomahawk. That would probably really suck, right? But if you're anyplace else, I mean, what can't you do with the tomahawk? Well, it's not as easy to pound in, you know, dowels or tent stakes or, you know, any type of smashing, you know, building type of thing you need to do. Where a good camp axe has that nice flat back and you're doing that all day long, right? And tomahawks do as well. So anyway, let me come back to you guys and I'll get that. Oh, yeah, I can see you guys now. All right. But so I just wanted to throw that out there because, well, because we were just talking about it, and Nick kind of just like threw that nice little jumper, and I just, you know, felt it was too easy. I had to grab that pass. So, Nick, now does that make a little bit more sense? I don't know if you've seen that before we come down to Redbeard, because you were just talking about, you know, thinking
100%.
about it. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, we keep talking about, you know, it's just another rock in your pack. It's just another rock in your pack, right? And kind of, I like to think about the size of the containers that I'm using, because if I carry too big of a container, I'm going to fill it up. It's just in my nature, right?
Yep.
So that's a pretty important thing too. It's not just the stuff inside the bag. The bag itself does matter, but I mean, it's constant evaluation, right? I'm laughing because you said kitchen sink, and there's a kitchen sink in my truck right now. But the whole idea is like, you know, do I need that? Well, maybe if we're going camping. I mean, the whole idea of having a rooftop tent is being able to just go whenever I want, right? Yeah. So I have a big truck. I can carry a kitchen sink back there. It's a fold-up one. It's tiny, but you know, the idea being that, and then I will say this, as far as enjoyability goes, from a civilian standpoint, if you have too much stuff and you're spending hours and hours setting up camp rather than camping, maybe cool, right? Maybe you're doing it for the gram or whatever, and you're out there taking pictures and making your camp look perfect, right? But realistically, we are practicing for something, right? Yeah. Like when I take my family out camping, I am practicing for eventual maybe survivability, right? Like, or just instilling a love of the outdoors into my daughter, stuff like that. And anything that gets in the way of that, in the way of too much gear, or, you know, it's not working properly because they're too complicated, or, you know, they're unrecognizable. All these things that do apply in Carver, right? It detracts from the enjoyment of the outdoors. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to try ourselves better and make ourselves more useful and enjoy outdoors. Did I lose you guys?
But we lost you a little bit there at that very end. You kind of got a little shaky and internet interruption. Can you just say that last piece again one more time? We got you back now.
Yep.
So yeah, just, you know, like why are we going outdoors, right? We're going outdoors to practice like some survivability, some bushcraft, right? But also for a love of the outdoors and an enjoyment of it. And if you have too much gear and you're sitting there organizing your gear all the time, which I'm 100% guilty of, by the way, it becomes less enjoyable and more of a chore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's like the bright, shiny thing, you know, that can actually overcomplicate it. And now you're just so focused on keeping it super clean or oiled or whatever the bright, shiny thing requires.
Exactly.
And
right.
Yeah. And then like your beer coaster, I can't see what, but there was something about fun on your beer. Like then you're not, how much fun is that at that point in time? Right. You know?
Right.
I think it's backwards, but mermaids have more fun.
No, that was pretty good. That was good. But yeah, no, like, because that's the whole point, you know, fun, but, you know, but I think, and, you know, and from the light fighter perspective, you know, again, but fun doesn't outweigh safety, security, you know, like, you know, it's not going to be so much fun, you know, when somebody loses an eye, to use that, like, you know, that stupid adage right there, you know? So you got to
100%. I mean, there are certain non-negotiables, right? Like you need to have a basic first aid kit. You need to have the ability to use that first aid kit. I mean, all of that is definitely like, well, within inside of your Carver scope, it's that's the stuff that you need to have. right?
Food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate. I mean, everybody's got their own little way of saying it. I'm sure you've heard, Jack, I think, does get home. I know a lot of people do the 10 C's, so there, but, however you want to look at it, but yeah, there are definitely fundamentals or essential elements that if you don't take with you in some form or fashion, and then matter of fact, go back to see some of our other, our loadout live videos. We're talking about different types of kits, a small kit on your person, a slightly larger kit in your rucksack, and one in your car, depending on what you're doing, and then it's more modular. You can plug and play. Hey, I really am only going out for 5 miles. It's a very well-populated trail, very safe. I'm still going to take a first aid, but realistically, even if bad weather showed up and I've already checked the weather, it's going to be okay. And there are shelters along the way. So if there was inclement weather, I just, a little bit down the trail, I can get to a shelter, and I've got an emergency fire kit, and I've got like a poncho, or a poncho liner or whatever for, warm weather, blah, 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 blah. And I got my water. Yeah. So you can do that. But, and then still have fun. But, and I've heard so many people like say it, and maybe, Redbeard, I know you got some other things you want to talk about, but, bring this back to both you guys from that light fighter perspective. Oh, it's only going to, I was just only going for a walk, or I'm only doing this, and it's not that big of a deal. I don't need to do this. Now, conversely, there are some of us that are a little bit too, whatever that is, ADD or whatever, and we take too much stuff, but you got to have something. But there's no excuse for going out there. It's just irresponsible. And just think about your car, for example. How do you not have road flares, emergency first aid kit? You don't know how to change your own tire, and you're driving a car. What? You don't have to be a full-on mechanic, but, know some of the basic stuff, right? You guys want to address that, and throw that in there from the gear, outdoor light fighter world? Because Jeremy, I can see is smiling. I know Jeremy wants to show off his kit. Well, but let's just do that last little bit first, give you guys a chance to talk.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh no, I'm looking forward to seeing the gear that you've got prepared for us.
There it is.
Well, it's super simple, and Mark and I actually had a discussion about this in the during one of our light fighter conversations, and it was weighing the positives versus the negatives of something like a jet boil system. And we had a pretty good discussion about it, Mark. We're like, okay, does it help? Is it a net negative? Is it really that much weight to bring with you? And I think what our conclusion is like, no, like there's actually more inherent positives with having a jet boil system, whether it's not being seen, whether it's having something that you can readily just use right away instead of toiling, in a downpour and being like, okay, I'm cold, I'm pissed off, I'm wet, like all I want is to eat.
All my fuel sources are wet, all the wood is wet, there's no tinder. Yep.
And it's like this one is it's the Minimo, and I just want to point out there's a lot of container space there, so it's like you could still put a couple packets of oatmeal and a couple things of coffee in there in conjunction with the actual cooktop or the attachment that goes in the bottom here. So you have stuff that's not only sealed away, but at the same time it's like it's readily available. So all you need is water, and this can boil water right away. If you actually want to go a step further, you can purify it with some tablets or whatever. This thing, in my opinion, my personal opinion, is worth the weight that goes in your bag, because you have something that readily can make you food. It can warm up water. It can purify water to some degree. It can bring, I'm a huge coffee guy. So if I need a morale boost, like Mark and I had talked about, I think during that discussion, it's like, dude, whether it's a candy bar or coffee or whatever, it's like, this is something that it just why wouldn't you have it? I know it sounds stupid, but it's like, would you rather, use a ferro rod and a magnesium striker every single time for the duration of the 14 days that you're out there? Or would you rather use something like this until you run out of something and then have to go to that? Or, and I'm a redundant person, have a Bic lighter before you even get to the ferro rod. I mean, in the end of the day, if this runs out, at least you have a Bic lighter so you can start that fire a little bit faster potentially. But it's like, dude, like, why take the path of, you know, and I know this is kind of going to go in opposition of what the ticker is down there, but there are some things to where it's like, we really do make it harder than it needs to be for ourselves. And there's no reason for it other than the fact that it's going to accelerate the potential of us dying faster. And I'm not about dying faster. I like extending the time I have here so I can annoy Mark and have 4-hour-long conversations with him till like 12 at night. So, I mean,
just
I don't know
think
about
of how
you
many
guys.
calories you're burning when you're using a bow drill, right?
Oh, dude,
Like,
it's
Well, hey, fellas, on a serious note, let's do this. Let's kind of rehash that because
Yeah.
you know we're not doing it justice because there are so many like you know different little
Yeah.
elements to break down. And Nick, you just did one, so why don't you just go with that? Like you know, so let's just do Carver. Let's do some pros and cons on you know like. So again, light fighter, which also, thinking smarter, not harder, right? Hey, you know, what Nick just said. Great. You've got a ferrule rod or you've got mad bow drill skills. Okay. But every time you want fire to heat food or to boil water, whatever you're doing, you now have to create a fire.
Yeah.
And, and maybe in under ideal circumstances, that's just fine. And the jet boil is your backup. But I can clearly imagine and envision a number of scenarios, and then some of them to what Nick just said. How many calories am I expending trying to do a bow drill? And, is that even under like optimal conditions? What if it's suboptimal, and it's really windy and everything's wet? Did your bow drill? Yeah. So go ahead, Nick.
No, I mean, I love just a big lighter. I mean, people get so, you were saying it earlier, people get so into the weeds. And I think it's a little bit of a romanticism about like, oh, well, yeah, I can make fire if I need to. Perfect. Great. Awesome. Right. But having a big lighter, in your backpack weighs nothing and is so quick, right? A big lighter and some like little fire starter, quick tinder tabs or whatever they are, right? I mean, I use those things all the time because it's a cheap device to get fire, right? I want it and I want it now. It's getting, everything else is getting in the way of what we talked about earlier. And I know, having fun in the woods, right? But, or getting my water boiled or making my coffee, which is going to help me concentrate and really focus in on the task that I need to do because I'm out in the woods and I'm having a bad time, right? So yeah, I mean, they're good skills to have. Don't get me wrong. And you should probably have a ferro rod because again, it's a redundancy thing, right? And if you have a survival knife, it doesn't take up any extra space or weight because you have one strapped to it, right? But I mean, a Bic lighter is like the ultimate cheat, right? For when you're out in the woods and you need to make a fire.
Well, and on that same note, just going into the jet boil, like, because, again, somebody say, well, hey, I thought we were talking about light fighter and, Carver and, only taking things that you need. I think, again, Jeremy, the conversation, we've had a couple times now and that last one where we really broke it down and we just did our own Carver. It's like, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But what if all the wood is wet? What if you're in an environment or a situation where it's unadvisable? Having a fire would be a bad idea. And all you're really doing is you're just going to stop for 20 minutes, change your socks, do foot maintenance, and you just want to do a brew up because, like Nick said, you want a little bit of coffee or caffeine or bouillon or whatever you're going to do with it, right? Well, the time it's going to take you to get a fire and get all that organized where, well, now somebody's not doing foot maintenance or they're not, replacing or working on some other thing that they need to do to continue the hike or, or checking the map or whatever. Whereas like you just set that thing down and it literally, I mean, they're like about a minute to 2 minutes. It's boiling water. It's hot food, and it's not, and it's not going to burn the forest down, and X, Y, and Z. So Redbeard, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, it's like I know like it, again, it kind of seems like we're somewhat going against what we were saying earlier, but we're really not because this is one of those things to where like, yes, is there a cost entry here? Yes, there is. However, they're proven systems. They've been used a lot by a lot of people. JetBoil, even in their advertising, and Mark, I don't know if you've ever seen them in the wild during your service, but supposedly JetBoil says they're used in military service. Now, whether that's for us or whether that's abroad, I don't know.
I use them all the time. So again, and then so there you go. Like, in Arctic Light Infantry, one of our things was a squad stove, right? So like that concept, because you need to have hot food and lots of calories and stuff like that, and in that cold weather environment. No, we had a squad stove, which is like, it's like, of the larger jet boils, was just kind of like a large fucking jet boil, I mean, really. So,
and and it's like at the local Fleet Farm here, which is like an outdoor general purpose store. They actually have like a camp stove version of this, and it's bigger, but like even when you lift that up, it's like, oh wow, like this is actually incredibly light. So like if you're actually thinking about something to have for your home, just as like, hey, if the power goes out or something like that, like honestly, it is one of those things.
Hang on, or to throw in the Nick's vehicle right next to the kitchen sink. I mean, seriously, why not?
This is one of those pieces of gear, in my opinion, and I think we all kind of have agreed on this. It does pay for itself, and the weight is so negligible with this piece of gear that it makes it worth it for bringing. So to me, this is almost in every environment piece of gear. This is translatable to cold weather, hot weather, rainy. It doesn't matter. Like if it fails, then in my opinion, it just means that you used it enough to the point to where it's just like, all right, I give up. I can't do this anymore. I'm heading into retirement,
Well, and then just real quickly though, just some other, the pros and cons, thinking of Carver. Okay, well, it runs on a fuel source, right? It's not going to run on natural fuel source. You have to have a fuel source with you. Those fuel sources, again, back to what Nick was just kind of mentioned. We mentioned Cuban weight. They weigh almost nothing. They don't take up a lot of room. On my JetBoil, the larger one, I can actually, you got all the accessories, things. I have my fuel source inside of the cup, so it's not taking up any additional. But and it doesn't mean so then that fuel's going to eventually run out. That is 100% correct.
Yes.
JetBoil, that little how their technology how it works, but you use less fuel because it heats everything up very quickly, almost too quickly. But but again, you're using it to augment. It's a tool to augment your other things. When you have the time, you sit down and you make a fire, and because you're at your campsite. And why would you have a fire at your campsite, right? That JetBoil is hey, we're on the trail and we're just going to stop and do a quick brew up. It was a damp morning. Everybody's got to change socks. Whatever. Or we're just taking a break. We've got 5 more miles to go. We're just going to have some coffee, or again whatever it is. Or it's lunchtime and we're going to throw like again, think of any of your survival rations or whatever food you've brought, and you're going to throw that in there, and you're going to make some ramen noodles or whatever you're doing, right? And you're just going to brew it up right there, and there's your lunch. And so you've saved time and save energy as opposed to trying to do that. Now there's chemical heaters, and I'm sure there are people say, well, just eat your shit cold. Yeah. Okay. But there are environments in which, you really need that stuff hot, and then, but back to Nick's point, and then back even to Carver, there's an aspect like, what is the effect on you if all you're eating is just cold, gelatinous food all the time out of your MRE? You want to get that stuff, man. You need it.
You don't want to survive, right? It goes back to I mean, we were talking about it, I think, before the show, but survival versus thrival, right? Or surviving versus thriving, right? Where you can eat cold MREs for a while. I mean, you can, but are you enjoying life doing that? Are you an effective fighter in the light fighter role, right? Yeah. Because you're morally depleted and you don't even want to go. It's the oh man, it's that really good thing. It's like, what is it?
Smarter, not harder.
3 weeks without food, 3 days without water. Yeah. 3 hours without something, 3 hours without shelter, 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 seconds without hope, right? Yep. It's the 3 seconds without hope, I think, is the most important and often overlooked version of that, because it only takes me 3 seconds to pull my gun and blow my brains out because I don't want to be here, right? Yep. Like if it is so bad and I've eaten cold rations for the last 2 months of my life, that's not a place I want to be, you know? And to your point, like some of these things in Carver that we can mitigate with the lack of fuel, right? There are camp stoves out there that fold up as tight as that one, but run off of diesel, right? Or can run off of gasoline. So you can go and you can procure that out in the wild, and maybe you don't need the little butane.
You broke up a little bit, but we got you. You know, you don't need that butane. And again, the 3 fuel stoves that work off of, things that you can, again, salvage from the environment. But, then you go, a little bit weight. But at the end of the day, there's always going to have to be that X factor in there. And, and I'm sure there's plenty of people watching, who've done, hey, I've gone 14, days straight on Emery's. I have a picture of me. I don't know if I'll try to pull it up here. Maybe I'll show what happens to your body of just 3 months of living off of MREs and T-rats and one hot meal a day, on the local food. It took me, gosh, I kind of wish I was back there now. Now I'm just, because I haven't been able to exercise, I'm old and fat. But, it took me probably about 2 years to recover from that. I looked, you can see all my ribs. I looked like something out of Auschwitz. Redbeard, I think I've shown you that picture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just like, that's like you said, Nick, that's not a place you really want to be, like you're there doing a mission, but like, man, I want some hot, good food. You need it. And, especially if you're really burning calories and, you're physical and, people are trying to shoot you and kill you, you've got a lot of stuff going on. Right. And then then you are running around with plates on that whole time. Right. because it's a different, so again, there is a time and a place for that, and that was one of them. So, hey boys, we're at an hour and a half. Husky Bunch just said in the chat, I used to eat instant oatmeal dry out of the package. Husky Bunch, that is a technique. I think there are other better techniques, but hey, man, that's a technique. You do you, but we're at an hour and a half here, guys. Let's kind of start thinking about wrapping it up.
For sure.
Redbeard, I don't know if that was the only piece of gear you want to talk about, or if you want to get back to it and talk just a little bit more about it, and then let's kind of start thinking about our closing comments and final thoughts.
Well, it's going to be the only one because I think it factors into, I think, what the crux of, at least to me, what light fighter is. And Mark, we've talked about this a number of times, mobility. Like, you're not trying to get into an open field engagement. You're not trying to oppose a massive battalion of people. You're there to cause a disturbance, cause chaos, hit hard, hit fast, and maneuver and be mobile. And it's like, in the end of the day, there's a lot that you can do as a light fighter element, but you have to have the things to augment that. And so, like, if you do think about something like a jet boil, like, what does that do? It keeps you mobile. You don't have to stop as long. You're not creating a signature. And so it's like, when you really examine this, it's not just that. It's like, what are you wearing? I love load-bearing equipment. I like different forms of load-bearing equipment. I would take that, and I've shot and I've done firearm training with a plate carrier and with like a SMERSH rig or other load-bearing types of rigs. And it's like, you can tell the inherent difference when you run, when you walk, when you carry magazines, how stuff sits on you, how much more comfortable it is, your ability to maneuver a firearm from one area to another, the ability just to like put your hands above your head and out to your sides, and so many different things. And it's like, what we really consider for gear, whether it's that or whether it's, just going out camping for a weekend, really is going to be the determining factor of whether it's going to help or hinder you. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not big into hindrance. Sometimes we can't avoid it. There are certain situations to where we have to pick that weight up and we have to move it. But if we can mitigate that and we can make the most out of what we have, and we can stay light, we can stay mobile, and we can stay effective, that's the crux, I think, of this whole conversation here, is being as effective as we can while staying light and mobile. And to me, I think that, simple, multi-use, load-bearing, like, what can we make the most of, like, with what we put on ourselves, whether it's belt and stuff like that, like that's big. But you have to be considerate. You have to consider your gear. You have to consider your environment, the application, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think that's kind of what we were trying to explain. So
You mean, Jeremy, that you don't like to play in hard mode all the time?
I like it. So there's a saying that I like to use: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. They made cheat codes for a reason. So
cheat to win. If I wanted to, slog through a video game, I'm 100% with you there, buddy.
I play on hard mode because I'm a masochist, not because I have to. Okay.
Well, see, I only play on hard mode because it seems like sometimes in life I get stuck on hard mode.
Yeah.
But that's not my fault.
Yep. Right. No, I feel that.
So I would say everything you're saying is absolutely 100% accurate and true. I do have a question though. How familiar are you guys with the Grail water filter system?
Oh, Grail's awesome.
I know it. It fits in our Scout. I've got one, or I may have given it away, but I used to have one. Okay, why? What's up? What do you got for us?
I don't have it here to show you guys, but the titanium one is an amazing piece of gear that satisfies all those requirements and fits really, really nicely with something like a jet boil.
Yeah.
And gives you that it's another pot, right? It's something that you can boil in, which is why I like the titanium one and not the plastic one.
Yep.
But I take it with me everywhere. If I'm going on a trail run, right? It's light enough that I just use that as my water bottle, and then I don't have to worry about like how long on the trail am I going or what am I doing, right? I'm in Florida. There's water everywhere. I just dip some out of the swamp, press that sucker down, and start drinking, and it tastes great. And maybe there's pond scum in the bottom of my bottle, and I have to take it home and clean it. But I mean, I'm not ingesting that. So. Yeah, that's just another. Whenever we talk about jet boils and stuff, I have a jet boil. I actually prefer the I think it's the MSR Whisper Light.
Sure,
it's just a slightly different thing. It's a slightly different way of doing stuff, and then having that pot that is part of that Grail system or that cup. I mean, it's a cup, but using that as like an oil. And then I just carry a tiny little, they make these tiny little gas bottles that are almost the same size, but they're refillable, right? You can use white gas in them. You can use, like I said, you can use diesel, you can use gasoline. For me, I don't like, and the reason that I got into that side of things is I don't like this is going to make me sound super weird, but I don't like the disposability of those butane canisters.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Because people do throw those away a lot. And I've seen them. I've seen them out in the woods. Right. I've seen people that have been careless in our.
That's just bad stewardship too. So.
Totally.
Well, and that goes against the light fighter concept. You don't leave that stuff behind. Yeah. You don't.
These are not people who are thinking the light fighter concept.
No, but it's the same thing. It's an affront to nature. It's a rude eyesore for everybody else who wants to enjoy it. It's not natural. No, I'm not going to go so far as saying, packing out your fecal matter and stuff. But there's people who do that. I think there's other ways to do it. We have that a different conversation. But like your detritus, your debris like that. I've never seen the pictures. Just like about a month ago. Somewhere in my feed, cool video about Everest came up, and but just to see the debris field and to hear, and I didn't know, but how much, they can only get so many pounds of garbage off there every time because helicopters don't always work at those altitudes, very little air, thin atmosphere, but and then you just see all this crap lying there, right? And it's just like it's bad enough you see that on Everest, it's turned into a major thing, but you just said, Nick, you don't want to be out in the woods and you just see that there in the side of the trail, come on, man, pack that shit out with you. That's how Charlie, to use the term for the NVA, that's how he finds you, man. That's how he tracks you down and gets you.
Yeah. Exactly. Leave no trace doesn't just mean camping, right?
Yeah.
Part of that is, I've carried so many of those out for other people, right? That I'm just like, so again, different systems, but they're all valid and they all check all of those boxes.
And just to your point,
making a fire super quickly anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But so again, but just real quickly though, so when you do Carver, there's that individual side of it, right? You're going into those categories and assigning a metric or a weight to it, a number based on your experiences and how you're going to use it and how it works for you, like what you're just saying, Nick, so yeah, obviously but the concept though is, is still that type of device is something that's still worth considering, when you're out in the woods.
And just to supplement, like what Nick was saying,
because I have multiple copies of them, right? And they go in all of my little bags that I have secreted away, right? It's because it's just that useful and it's that easy. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, eventually you will run out of fuel, right? But you're making fires along the way. You're only using that when you absolutely have to. When I need to be quick and light and sneaky, right? Is when I use that. And then at times when I want to have a good campfire or if I want to have a cookout, right? I've got a little fold-up grill. I'll use that. That's great. Hot dogs on a fold-up grill, best for camping.
Okay, no, you're not. I've got I can't remember if it's a mount. I can't remember if it's a chef version or a mountain, but whatever the company is. But I've got a 2-burner little fold-up grill like that. And again, I'm into the truck camping. I've got truck camping envy, with like you and well, anyway, you see how people
watch this space. We'll have to have a truck camping episode.
Well, so we've had Brett Gaba on here before, and he's got a really cool setup with his. It's not a Tacoma, it's a Tundra, but yeah, no, like that, like hells to the yes, and then so just to your point, yeah, of course you're going to be carrying a burner stove or whatever, because that might just be the thing. You don't know where you're camping and maybe you don't have the time. So it's the same concept. It's exactly that. And if you've got a vehicle, well, okay, then there's more you can pack into it. But as we already just said,
we're getting more away from the light fighter at that point. But I mean, well, but also are we? Because that's just a toolbox, right? At a certain point, everything breaks down. And what can I take away from that enables me? Do I cache all that stuff somewhere or?
Well, and then that's actually another point of it too. If this is your favorite trail, this is your favorite camping site, consider caches. Again, that would, that's a form of resupply. That's maybe you hump it in the first time, but if it's something that can withstand time, or if you know how to do a cache, how to protect it, bury it, and then, mark it so you or your friends can find, why, there's nothing wrong with that kind of stuff, and then,
well, we've done it, to take it full circle back down to the, the civilian camping, climbing, all that stuff, caching for hikes, right? Where you drive around the circle once, right? And maybe it's a big circle, 30, 45 miles, but you cache equipment, gas canisters or whatever you need, extra food. That way you're not hauling 80-pound packs the whole way, right? Because that is no fun, and you're going to wear yourself out. And I mean, why do we go out into the woods? All the reasons we talked about before, right? But one of them for me, and for a lot of us in the civilian side, is for fun. I don't want to be miserable for 45 miles.
No. Those
not
days,
anymore,
the days of sleeping in the mud and carrying 100 pounds, that's over.
Yeah, that's for much younger men. Yeah, we don't need to be doing that anymore.
No, not at all. Murph Nudes checked in.
I complain about carrying my 30-pound child now. She's getting too heavy.
Yeah, that's enough. You don't need a plate carrier. You're carrying around a kid. Exactly.
Oh man, I had when she was small. I had one of those what is it, tactical baby gear. They make these nice MOLLE covered baby carriers, right? And I was like, oh, it's kind of like a plate carrier with a very, very non-sacrificial plate.
Yeah. All right, Jeremy, let's bring it over to you. And then I just want to give a shout out. We just saw Murph Nudes just checked in. Way to join in here, Murph. Good to see you. He's been on before. All right, Redbeard, let's bring him back over to you and we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. So I guess my biggest point that I'd like to make is a lot of this is very individual. And I think we've kind of talked about that, but I really do mean that, because what I bring, it's not going to be the same as what Nick brings. It's not going to be the same as what Mark brings. And that's fine. Because in the end of the day, you should be somewhat, setting up your kit to your strengths, and I would even argue, and I know some people might refute this, but to your weaknesses. Like don't bring stuff that like you're not good at using. Like train on it, learn how to use it, but like if you can't use it, then it's just weight. It's one of those things to where it's like learn how to use it or don't bring it right away, because it ends up as weight. But you have to figure out like what works for you, because what works for me isn't going to be the same as what Mark does or what Nick does, and that's okay. Like it's good to have unique setups to you, and I, and there might be some crossover from what I bring to what Mark brings to what Nick brings, but in the end of the day, we're all going to have our own things that we're going to bring. And I just want to say, like in that, the MSR systems are not bad. I've also dabbled with the MSR systems. I like them. I just ended up with Jetboil because it's what was there. It was what was available. It appealed to me. And so that's what I got. But in the end of the day, like anytime you go to buy something that you're looking into, you think is going to be useful, do some research, make an informed decision as opposed to just buying it because it's what other people use. I would push people as much to MSR as I would to Jetboil or anything like that. And honestly, I have a buddy who has just like a cheap Coleman, like screw-on one, and it works just fine. Like it takes a little bit longer, but it still works fine. Like if there's a barrier to entry there, buy a Coleman, use it until you can get something better. It's better to have it than to sit there and try and make a fire in a downpour. At least you have something to warm water or food up with, as opposed to like being, just totally in the sadness and depression and being miserable, So
let me just make one statement, bring it back to you guys for kind of final comments on this. But we're having a little fun here at the end, but bringing it all the way back full circle to the beginning. We're talking about gear, right? In a way, we're using like a military thought process and kind of the evolution. Which again, think Rogers Rangers, think of, the Swamp Fox, think of, like travel light, freeze at night, knowing how to navigate, knowing, how to do land navigation, knowing how to forage, knowing how to, procure water, procure food, and thinking about how each piece of gear is critical. I just wanted to bring that back full circle. So again, we're going into maybe some specifics and having a little bit of fun, but at the end of the day, if you look at those shows, I don't think I've ever, I've seen a bunch of those programs, and I don't think I've ever seen somebody who's just got like, I just brought this pocket fidget widger thingy with me just because it just, it has no utility, right? So think about your gear and think about, which piece of gear do you really need? Which are combat? I'm going to say combat multipliers. Use Carver again. Force multipliers, which are going to do a lot more for you. And then thinking again, your environment, that's the most important thing. This is where I want to end it, bring it back to the guys. We're not telling you, again, and I've never done that. There is no cookie cutter, right? Your physical limitations, your operating environment, the environment, and that's all of those variables are going to come into play here. But the bottom line is knowing how to operate within those conditions with the tools that you have. And those tools are going to be force multipliers. I don't know who wants to jump on that kind of first as we kind of start segueing out. Redbeard or Nick?
I'll hop on that.
Okay.
It's interesting. You talk about tools, and I'm going to steal something from a guy on YouTube called the Tech Prepper. He has a saying that I love, which is tools, not toys, right? And that basically equates to you get as good as you can afford, but then you get out there and you use it, right? That's the best force multiplier for any of this stuff, whether you're talking civilian or military, right? Is do I know how to, and if I need to, can I, right? Because if you're not familiar with the equipment that you're carrying around, then it's useless to you. I could have the most fancy whiz bang auto cooker, 3000 widget that does everything that I need it to. But if it's too complicated to use, or I've never tried to use it and I kept it in the package, and then the day that I need it, cold and hungry and miserable, and I've not put in any of the work into it to figure out how to use that thing, it does me no good. So I mean, there's different flavors for everybody, and you may buy something because you think it's cool, and it totally is, right? I mean, that's fine too. But again, getting a little bit away from the light fighter concept of having something that is multi-purpose and useful in a lot of different scenarios. So, man, I kind of lost my train of thought there. I had one.
That'll happen on those big jobs.
Well, welcome to the program. That happens like every moment over here. Redbeard, let's bring it over to you, sir.
So I'm going to present the audience, I guess, with kind of my final comments, which is, and Mark probably has heard this. Nick, you may have heard this as well, but it's something called the 6 Ps. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So if you guys can if you can scribe that somewhere, and anytime you're going to take a trip, seriously, anytime you're going to take a trip, or you're even planning something around your house to fix or whatever the case is, prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Ever since I heard that, I think about that before I go and do something, and I'm like, okay, am I going to look like an absolute chud halfway into my excursion or my project or my trip or whatever, or am I actually going to do fairly well based off of what I have? And it's kind of like this internal review before you leave, and I will tell you, I've had a couple trips to where I've had a checklist and I've gone through it. And sometimes if you overthink that checklist, you will forget something on that checklist because you become so hyper focused on okay, I got this. Don't overcomplicate it. I swear you will forget something on that checklist. Just keep it simple. Just go down the line and then just make sure that you have what you need and you'll be fine. But if you get too ADHD about it or too OCD about it, you will forget the one major thing on that checklist because you're worried about 100 other little things. So that's my little tidbit, I guess. That's what I have to contribute. And that's, I guess, kind of my closing comments on the whole thing. So.
All right. Any alibis? Nick, any alibis, last minute thoughts or new thought that you want to chime in here at the very end?
I have one story that I have to get to,
yes.
because we talked about this before, and I need to talk to your audience about this because I don't want them thinking that I'm some kind of weird chud. I like that word. But we got to talk about EDOs, right? And why do I have two? I have two because I ruined.
Well, we could save that for another live stream and have you back on. I'm not necessarily.
Okay.
Look, it's my live stream.
I can do that.
And I may.
No, dude, that's fine. I'll give myself a teaser for the next time I come on.
Well, and look here, I guess we definitely want to have Nick come back on. And look, I really pride myself on the gear we make because I'm trying to apply these principles into the gear. Right? It's multifunctional. It's multi-purpose. It's going to score highly on Carver, working it through a whole bunch of different scenarios for different people. It's not going to be a piece of gear that's in your closet and you only take it out, 1 or 2 times a year. You've got a lot of use for it. So, but I just, for the CLS, maybe we'll just have you come over on one of the loadouts and we'll have that conversation over there. Yeah. This is more of we're just having fun bullshitting, CLS after dark. And I know we've had a couple guests, and I really appreciate it, who went to help plug, Mark, you got to be plugging your gear. And I'm like, yeah, not on Thursday night. Let's just kind of,
It is. I'll plug it for you. It's excellent gear. It's so good, guys. It's so good. If you don't,
and I'm not going to lie, yours actually looks really sexy right there.
If you don't have an EDO, I mean, look at that. Look at that patch on there. That's just, ooh. Oh, I don't know if it's going to focus. Come on.
Oh,
there we go.
There it is.
Yeah, that is pretty.
Oh, if you know, you know. It's good gear. Get it.
You know, I will say we're talking about multi-use or multi-situation. As I'm sitting here speaking with my mouth full.
Yeah. What is up with you and Blackbeard eating
Right.
during the live stream?
Look,
Nobody's watching anymore.
Pizza is one of those things, hot or cold, baby. It can be eaten anytime. I'm here to tell you. So,
all right.
I'm
Hey,
never going to hear the end of it from Mark, by the way, guys. Okay.
Oh, no, you will, you know, but I'm glad somebody did remind me, and thank you, learn me something. And Steve, I definitely apologize. Look, Steve is sending me so many jokes. I have to start doing some of the jokes at the end of the podcast over here on CLS After Dark as well. So before you eat, Redbeard, you know, put yourself on mute though, so we don't have to hear you chewing. And then I'm going to read 2 jokes from a great guy sends me these jokes. They're just horrible dad jokes. And that's what I think is really funny. This is one of my favorites. At the age of 65, grandma started walking 10 miles a day. She's now 93 and we have no idea where she is. It's just so bad. You know, a history degree is useless. There's no future in it. But I'm pumped. There we go. Those are your 2 dad jokes, courtesy of Steve L. Thank you, sir. Always awesome. All right, boys. Alibi fire. Anybody got any last minute things that they want to add in here? Otherwise, Redbeard, because you're here, you know, I'm going to ask you to do an outro. But Nick, you got an alibi?
I got a joke for you.
Sure. We like jokes.
Okay. Did you guys hear about that one? Oh man, I'm horrible with celebrity names. But did you guys hear about that actress that killed her husband? I'm trying to remember what her name is. Reese?
No idea.
No idea. Redbeard, you want to help me?
No, the only Reese I know of is Reese Witherspoon, and I'm not sure.
No, not with a spoon. Not with a spoon. With a knife.
I knew there was going to be a setup in there. I could just tell you were just like, who's going to take the bait? I was like, oh no, man, that's a booby trap. I ain't going.
Thanks. No. Yeah, Redbeard, I needed your saving on that because Mark wasn't taking the bait.
Hey, look, I don't mind being the sacrificial lamb for that one. That was good. That was good.
Reese Witherspoon. No, with a knife. Yeah. Okay. All right, boys and girls. Really appreciate everybody taking the time. Hats off to Nick. He's, Redbeard. Hats off to Redbeard always for helping join. But Redbeard said, heck with it. I'm going to start eating. But, Nick taking the time away from his family, spend time, share his background and experiences with everybody tonight. Big hats off. Thank you very much, Nick. And I should have said this in the pregame. So when we do end it and I stop the live, we'll kind of go down, but then we'll do an after action review. I just give everybody a quick call and we just ask, what did you think? How did it go for you? What went well? Areas for
quick call.
Yeah. Well, we're going to keep it quick, right? And Husky Bunch saying good night. Murph Nude saying he'll have to watch it tomorrow because we talked about gear. And then Learn Me Something's telling me to remind the audience to like the video. Yeah, it's true. I mean, but you do you, right? If you sat through it, please do give it a like, a comment, outside of it. The algorithm is real. Censorship is still going on, so yeah, any help, is much appreciated. But just thanks everybody for being here. Hopefully you found this and educational and entertaining, right? So this was a slightly different version of the CLS After Darks, but we wanted to have this conversation. And we don't have time, and I'm trying to keep these at 2 hours, but because part of that attitude, that mindset, maybe I'll bring it up next week. Hey, just stay frosty out there. There's, we kind of started it, talking about some of these events, have that light fighter, attitude. I just talked about an ambush, right? Be cognizant of your surroundings, employ situational awareness, have, routes and know your abort routes and know where the hot spots and the trouble spots are. It is starting to look like the summer of love is starting to heat up. And, and I just feel so badly for you if you own a Tesla, because no one should be targeting you and damaging your property or calling you names simply because of a car you own. That's just absolutely retarded. And that's inexcusable. But anyway, so thanks to everybody. Any final alibis? Otherwise, I'm just going to let Redbeard do one of his classic Redbeard outros. Okay. Redbeard, take us on out. Gene, thank you. And again, thanks to everybody in the live chat. Thanks for making comments, asking questions. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody being here. Steve, thank you for the jokes. God bless everybody. Jeremy's going to take us out on one of his classic outros.
Yeah. Real quick before I do, one more shameless plug. Come and check me out on Saturday at Sentinels of Liberty podcast. We're going to have a great guest. It's going to be covering economics, and it's something that I know a little bit about, but I'm certainly not a professional. So I'm bringing somebody in who is a lot more professional than me. Guy's super smart. Again, he's a writer at the Libertarian Institute. He was just on Scott Horton's show. Guys, he's a smart guy. Pretty smart guy. So I'm very honored to have him. Tom Edlam is the guy's name. And if you haven't, maybe go over to the Libertarian Institute and check out what he's written. So I'm very, very excited about that. And I hope you guys are going to come over and check it out. So
Saturday.
Saturday. Yep, Saturday at
I'm trying to plug it for you. Saturday, 1700 Central Daylight Time.
Yep.
Sentinels of Liberty.
Absolutely. So there it is. Hope to see you over there. And again, leave a comment, good, bad, or indifferent. Let me know what you think. Put your opinions down there. Maybe subscribe if you like it. I'm not going to tell you to do it, but if you like it, I'll take it. So that being said, I will take us out on our on a good oldie but a goodie. So look, the flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people willing to support and defend it. And that means each and every one of you. It takes all of us to make this happen. It takes all of us to build a community, to keep the politicians doing the job that we want them to do and that we expect them to do. And it takes us to enforce the Constitution, because paper does not enforce itself. So with that being said, be good to each other, treat each other with a little bit of, empathy, a little bit of respect, and build the community that you want to see come out of this. Because in the end of the day, it's not enough to just sit there and have a simple opinion. We've got to actually get to work. So that being said, God bless everybody. Have a fantastic night. And I hope to see you on Saturday and many more podcasts to come.
You know it. All right, everybody, reach out if you got questions, comments. I'll do the best. Really appreciate everybody in the chat. Yeah, God bless everybody. Thanks to Gene and the crew and Husky Bunch. We got new faces. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. Hope you found it informative. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on Saturday over at Sentinels of Liberty, Jeremy's podcast. Yeah. Then I'll be back here Monday, our normal bat channel on Monday. With a loadout, and I'm going to go over some. Actually, maybe I'll talk to Nick. I can't throw him under the bus. Maybe we'll do something on the Edo, but anyway, we'll see you guys on Monday, and then next week we're going to be talking about the VA healthcare system, but also the one gentleman who's going to be on is just retired. He's a nurse, going to also be providing some comments that some of us older men might want to start thinking about or paying attention to, how our bodies start operating, especially those of us who are carrying too much weight on our back up and down hills, all this light fighter stuff, and so that'll be a good one. And I'll be sharing a little bit more information over there. So until then, if you got questions, reach out, and thank you very much for being here. God bless everybody. We'll see you guys again on the other side. I got to stop sharing that. All right, everybody. Gene, say goodnight. Everybody get going. Woo! We'll talk to you guys again soon. See you now.